Does your teacher defend and protect you at all costs? Are they seduced by your voluptuous or athletic body, or give you straight A's on all your assignments? Do they say you're mature for your age, smart, and extremely charming? Perhaps they are your friend? Are they in their early to mid-20s, light-skinned, cisgendered, and seemingly well-intentioned? Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not your teacher. That is what we call a disguised predator. Hello, my wonderful besties. I hope you're all well. It's time to call Ezra Fitz because we're talking about predators. A bestie requested me to talk about toxic relationships in anime. And since torturing my eyes is what I do for fun, might as well talk about student-teacher relationships. It was a frightening deja vu that unmasked itself as a syrupy hot red version of a never-ending nightmare. Student-teacher romances in anime explore romances through an extensively gendered gaze. So today, I want to explore what this all means. Why are student-teacher relationships romanticized? What does this mean outside the context of anime and manga? And are we letting escapism overlook these harmful relationships? We'll find out on this episode of I'm Not Like Other Teachers, I Love You. Like any well-documented film and TV trope, it has a tvtropes.org definition. It reads, "It is a pretty good bet that almost any show that features adults and teens interacting in an academic environment will eventually explore a romantic relationship between a teacher and a student. The basis for such a relationship is if it's actually a romance, and not just a sex or credit arrangement. Might be the student's adoration and respect toward the teacher's protective and caring instincts towards the student, or both. While the illicit, forbidden, and most often scandalous nature of these relationships can be mined for an angst-in universe." Student-teacher romances started gaining notoriety in romance stories during the 90s for their idiosyncratic portrayal of soulmates and pure love. Instead of highlighting predatory behavior and dangerous situations, these relationships are supposed to be desired and pursued. These relationships are actually their own subgenre of content. All you need to do is a simple search on my anime list or Anime Planet, and there is an extensive selection. From students seducing their teachers in order to receive higher grades, to bold declarations of love, all paved the way for some interesting storylines between adults and teenagers. What is tricky and in a morally gray area is that these relationships often target a tween to teen demographic.
911, what's your emergency?
As we've discussed on this channel before, the age of consent in Japan in most prefectures has been raised to ages 16 through 18. And whether or not the relationship is considered illegal, it is very much inappropriate and irresponsible for a glamorized portrayal of a student in a romantic relationship with their teacher. There is an uneven emotional and power balance at play here, as the teacher can affect the student's future, affecting their grades, friendships, and job prospects. Also, the nature of these relationships means that they must be presented as forbidden love storylines that, intentional or not, lead to grooming. In an article on student-teacher relationships on Rabble.ca, Dana Iwachow sums up how we tend to frame these types of relationships. It's easy to fall for the idea of a student-teacher relationship. It feels special that someone with that much influence and experience would pick you. Just like the students in those stories, you are interesting, attractive, or unique enough to sway them. You compel them to cross boundaries. This fantasy tries to convince you that the student has control over their teacher, when in reality, the teacher always wields the power. When the student is a teenager or preteen, the age gap is a major component of the power dynamic. The divide in age and experience makes any romantic or sexual interaction non-consensual in nature, which is why staff members who violate this are often fired and charged with criminal offenses. Regardless of the authorial intent made by the teacher, grooming most often leads to an abusive and unhealthy relationship. Some anime series in particular have become the blueprint for the "I'm not like other teachers" trope. Cardcaptor Sakura was serialized in Nakayoshi magazine in May 1996 and is now the face of one of the most overtly problematic student-teacher romances to date. If you're a Clamp stan, then you know age gaps are what they're all about. Marrying young is seen as empowering in fiction and is free from judgment regardless of whether their love is unconventional. From my limited understanding of the Cardcaptor Sakura manga, Toya and Kaho were in a relationship when Toya was in 8th grade and Kaho was a student teacher. Toya confessed his love for Kaho and Kaho accepted his feelings. The anime ended up scratching this storyline other than a few words of confirmation to provide context. A suspicious rumor reared its ugly head that Toya's breakup with Kaho could have indirectly sparked his homosexuality. DGD Davidson wrote a blog post in 2017 condemning the series for implying that Toya's middle school teacher made him gay. He quips, "Toya got molested by a middle school teacher, and that was such a traumatic experience that it made him gay. I'm sure that's not what Clamp intended us to get out of this, but hey, I'm just following the chain of events and drawing the obvious inferences." Okay, I'm kidding. Slightly. The canonical explanation is that Toya, like Sakura, has some innate magical powers. He can see ghosts and detect magical beings. He is attracted to magic, especially magical things that aren't human, which is why he's drawn first to Kaho and then to Yukito. Obviously, this was slightly satirical and mainly theorizing based on his point of view, but if this is true...
You done lost your damn mind. When you get your damn mind, you call me.
My little sister talked about Nadeshiko and Yujikata's relationship in another video, so if you want someone in Nakayoshi's demographic to explain this, watch that video. Cardcaptor Sakura is not the only series that uses this trope.
Oh, hell no.
Suraku JK Tohajin Kyoshi, Daytime Shooting Star, Tsubaki Cho Lonely Planet, Scum's Wish, Please Teacher, Faster Than a Kiss, Gore wa Koi desu, Danjo no Adam, and many more. And this is not to say that any of these series are bad, but it's striking to see how common student-teacher romances are in these mediums. Marmalade Boy defines a student-teacher romance by making Meiko an active protagonist, who chases after what she wants. Nomura, her high school English teacher. Nomura is shown as the kind, nurturing older man who loves Meiko and definitely doesn't uphold tactics of grooming, insinuating she is mature for her age because of how she handles her hostile home life. Like, let's just remember that Nomura reciprocated Meiko's confession when she was 12 and he was 20. Yeah, he's a predator. My wife is a high school student, uses Kyosuke as a stepping stone to Asami's desires, and presumably holds no insidious motivations. Although Asami's father forbids them from engaging in explicit activity until she graduates high school, the series still tries to paint Kyosuke as her lover and not a predator. Asami's father is also painted as unreasonable for not wanting them to get together. Even though their marriage after Asami graduates is legal, the romanticized nature of their relationship prior makes it very murky. What connects these two glamorizations is that they are shaded in varying levels of the male and female gaze, either presenting this relationship through a heterosexual or homosexual male lens, or vice versa. Of course, you can portray this trope in a nuanced way, but from the 90s to the mid-2010s, never heard of her. It also helps that in both of these series, these characters are painted as very attractive people. Speaking of, now I want to talk about the cinematic representations of student-teacher romances in the realm of animanga. The clutches of the male gaze grab hold of the Shonen Eki series Domestic Girlfriend. We follow our protagonist Natsuo Fuji, who loses his virginity to one of his love interests, Rui Tachibana. Throughout their first encounter, Natsuo is shy and nervous, as he has never slept with someone before. Unable to confess his feelings towards his crush on Hina Sensei, he views sleeping with Rui as a way to prepare himself for that potential moment. Rui desperately wanting to know what having Snacks feels like, is perplexed why she can't figure out if she likes it or not. From the premise, one might assume that this is going to be a coming-of-age romance story between Natsuo and Rui throughout their journey in high school, until the series takes a sharp turn when Natsuo's father reveals that he remarried a woman with 2 daughters, and those 2 daughters are Rui and her sister slash Natsuo's English teacher, Hina. One borderline incest plotline revealed later cement Natsuo's crush on Hina as the focus of the story. His attraction towards her isn't necessarily out of respect or admiration of her, but more of her snactual appeal. Hina also made it very clear that she does not seek out relationships with children.
お子様は専門外ですから。でも、優しい子は例外かもね。なんて。
Her partially sarcastic statement deems her the mature adult in the situation, but the rest of the season tells a different story. In episodes 3 and 4, we learn that Hina is in a relationship with another man named Shu Hagiwara, who was also her teacher in high school. Natsuo sees Hina slipping through his fingers and confronts her about it. This leads to a lot of graphic bed scenes that are uncomfortably romanticized in the fact that they are portraying. Hina plays the victim throughout the entire show, and I understand Kei Sasuga wanted to explore her character, but I think more time should have been paid to Natsuo and Rui's relationship. We don't need another naughty scene between Natsuo and Hina. I would rather have her break the cycle of grooming that she's been subjected to. Their chemistry, like a lot of student-teacher romances, is a bit lackluster. In fact, what I find strange is that they don't play on Natsuo's dream of becoming a writer to bring Hina and him closer. Hina's an English teacher after all, so that connection would bring them a lot closer and further both of their development. So it's clear that this relationship is merely fantasy. From Natsuo trying to kiss Hina when she's sleeping, to spying on her doing the deed in her bedroom, the list goes on. Later in the season, Natsuo starts to develop an unhealthy addiction into becoming Hina's boyfriend. He repeatedly says that he doesn't care if it ruins his father's marriage or ruins his career. His objective in life is to be with her. While this seems admirable in the moment, it makes it seem like since Natsuo is a man, that he is mature enough to be with Hina. This rhetoric inadvertently implies that younger men and older women are equals, which is not true. An adult pursuing a minor is predatory without exception. Eventually, Hina leaves Tokyo and sends Natsuo a note, stranding him in a deep depression. The audience is meant to feel sorry for them, but only because they can't be together. Natsuo and Hina practically wouldn't have a storyline without each other, because that's basically their entire arc throughout the course of the 12 episodes. And I, like many viewers assumed, it's basically a gateway H-genre anime. The final episode shows Hina and Natsuo having full-on snacks, going at it like bunnies. What I find even more worrisome is that this series was serialized in a shonen magazine, therefore classified as a shonen.
The woman was too stunned to speak.
I peeped at the end of the manga, and apparently, Domestic Girlfriend pulled the Vampire Knight. Natsuo not only marries Hina, but he also bears Rui's child. They explored more of Rui and Natsuo's relationship in the manga, but Kei Sasuga was like, psych! Let us shock our readers by changing the status of Natsuo and Rui's relationship in the last couple of chapters. And most of the audience absolutely loathe this. Which means the end of the series ends with Natsuo and Hina locked in holy matrimony. His former teacher who groomed him while he was a teenager. As we can see, Domestic Girlfriend's portrayal of the student-teacher romance is problematic. It makes Hina a consensual love interest when she is clearly manipulating and using Natsuo to her advantage. Not to mention the even more ickier part of him dating his stepsisters and enabling this as perfectly normal behavior. I'm sure there is a certain demographic of people who find this appealing, but that doesn't negate that the student-teacher romance was at the center of the story, only to create a warped fantasy. A series that handles serious topics extremely well, unfortunately falls prey to the sour taste of Kyoko and Katsuya's relationship, aka Toru's parents. I just have to touch on Fruits Basket because I have done a video on my channel about age gaps, and I didn't fully remember Fruits Basket having this, so I didn't bring it up, but after watching Prelude and scouring many Reddit forums, I've come to my own conclusion on Kyoko and Katsuya's relationship. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think Fruits Basket handles this relationship well. Editing me is popping in to just say that I know that Arisa and Kuruno also had a pretty sketchy relationship, but I just think the one with Kyoko and Katsuya was a lot more worse, especially because the movie just completely trivialized the situation. And I'm going to expand on that more later, but this is not to say that I hate Fruits Basket. Before all y'all come in my comments, I love Fruits Basket, but I think that we can talk about media and enjoy it while looking at it critically. For a quick little backstory, Kyoko dealt with very cold and abusive parents. She became a delinquent, often skipping school and involving herself in a gang. Once Kyoko visits her middle school and is scolded by one of her teachers, she is left alone in a room with Katsuya Honda, a student teacher. Their conversation seemed innocent and wholesome, as if Kyoko was finally catching a break. Katsuya then invited her out to lunch, and she saw this as a normal outing. Nothing sketchy should be happening, right? To be fair, Kyoko mentions how their interaction is extremely weird, but red flag number 1 appears when Katsuya turns down this statement, saying that he's only interning at her school, so their interaction is totally fine. Afterwards, Kyoko starts meeting up with Katsuya on the rooftop during their lunch periods, and the pair become close. Very close. The one positive aspect of their relationship is that Katsuya's presence does inspire Kyoko to continue pursuing her education, only for a short amount of time, but inspires her nonetheless. During the beach segment, Kyoko acknowledges their large age difference and how she doesn't stand a chance at being with him. For context, Kyoko is 14 and Katsuya is 22. Katsuya made several questionable statements, saying that he doesn't want to teach anymore because he fell in love with the student. Katsuya declared that he would marry Kyoko when her parents disinherited her for getting involved in a gang fight, but the nail that hit the coffin for most fans, solidifying Katsuya as a predator, was when Kyoko asked if he had a Lolita complex for having romantic feelings for her. And his response was...
Where in the world did you learn that phrase? Anyway, it's your fault for being born later than me.
You didn't say that. Tell me you did not just say that.
Oh my god. Whilst researching for this, I came across a CBR article that stated during this scene in particular, the writers said that moviegoers could hear the audience gasp in the theater. And, yeah, I'm sure referencing Lolita would garner that response. Just to jog your memory, the story of Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov is about a grown man's obsession with a 12-year-old girl. So I'm sure it's reasonable that fans would be concerned. And on the subject of Lolita, the novel Lolita was a cautionary tale, meaning that Nabokov does not condone any of Humbert Humbert's actions. He is framed in a negative way. Fruits Basket, on the other hand, does the opposite. It's not that I'm against humanizing Katsuya, but the film made him way too sympathetic and nowhere near predatory enough. Through and through, Katsuya was the main pursuer of this relationship. There's a plot point where Kyoko is having a mental breakdown about giving birth to Toru, and part of the reason has to do with her age. She views herself as not being mentally ready to take on that huge responsibility. Her traumatic past is still haunting her, and it doesn't help that after Katsuya's death, all of his family who were against their relationship blamed her for his death. Also, doesn't this further prove one of the main reasons Kyoko wanted Toru to attend high school is because she never got that experience herself? When Katsuya died, Kyoko had to take care of Toru all by herself, and she was so distraught and left all alone. This is why it's hard to say that their relationship was consensual. When you're a teenager in a vulnerable mental state, you are very unsure of what romantic love looks like, so you'll take any extra attention someone gives you as a sign of affection. At the end of the day, Katsuya was a loving father to Toru when she was a child and did all that he could to support her before he died. It seems the author's objective, Natsuki Takaya, was to show how Kyoko's trauma of not having familial support wanted to make sure she gave Toru a better life. So, sure, you can count that as non-predatory love. Google couldn't give me a definitive answer for this, but apparently Takaya seems to love age gaps. According to the Fruits Basket subreddit, most of her stories, she just wants to write these age gaps as a simple plot device and isn't trying to convince her audience that they should be pursued. And while I do believe her intent is good, the end result, however, is the endorsement where a teenager is marrying an adult, and that is a very shaky message to share with its audience. First question I have is relating to the Fruits Basket movie.
Oh boy. The thing is, I haven't seen the movie yet. However, I have read the manga, so I know about their relationship at the very least.
Yeah, would you love to explain?
Yeah, it's something. I feel like that relationship, it could have been made in a way where it was like saying a message at the very least, like, hey, Katsuya maybe isn't the best. And I think in some ways she does kind of say that because, you know, Kyoko is so distraught and just like mentally not there when she doesn't have the man who's like taken her in since she was like 12, 13. So like on one end, you do have kind of a message of like, hey, it wasn't good that this 12, 13-year-old was in a relationship with an adult because now she has nothing, that he's gone. But at the same time, they also really, really idealize him after the fact.
In between depiction and endorsement is like, depiction is when they don't end up together. They don't end up together, and he's framed in a way that's negatory, and it's through the young girl's perspective. That is what I consider depiction. Endorsement is, I'm even forgiving if they do that, but as long as they don't end up together. Like when I read some excerpts of Tsubaki Cho Lonely Planet, I was like, yeah, it was there, but it was like she didn't end up with him. So I was like, that you can forgive that. But it's like, Fruits Basket, they get married. So I'm like, I honestly feel it wouldn't even be bad if they just didn't have the marriage. Like, right?
Yeah. Well, see, and then I go back and forth on that because I feel like if they didn't end up together, I don't think Toru would be the way that she is.
Oh,
especially, I think the entirety of Fruits Basket would change. So on the one hand, I'm like, this does work narratively for the entire story. On the other hand, it's like, it got too romanticized, like you said. I feel like there's a way of showing that Katsuya was grooming Kyoko, or at the very least, like, taking advantage of her and her situation. But it doesn't come off that way at all. It comes off like he's like the knight in shining armor who comes in and like saves her, rather than, you know, saying, hey, this guy is taking advantage of this young girl for his own gain. Yeah, it's pretty common in shoujo, and I think it's because a lot of girls, you know, stereotypically will have crushes on their teacher at some point, especially if a teacher is showing them some sort of like kindness, I guess. And I've mentioned this before, but you know, there's the stereotypical feminine dream of having an older man who supports you, an older man who takes care of you in the future. And like, I think the fact that a teacher is already like a built-in stable job and you're around them all the time, it's just kind of a fantasy that a lot of like girls will end up having. So like, having that fantasy in shoujo is just to be like, here, you know, like you probably have a crush on your teacher at some point. What if it was real? Like, and it's, on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, if it's a fantasy, it's a romance, and not all romance is like gonna be like endorsing something. Like, to a degree, I don't necessarily care if romance series have bad stuff in it, as long as they're not like justifying it in the series. As long as they're not like, oh well, she's so mature for her age, you know, like I don't want to hear them say that in the series. I'd rather them just outright be like, I this isn't good, but whatever, you know, like the taboo is also there too that people really enjoy. But just when a series is like trying to be like, oh well, it's okay because of this reason, or it's okay because of this reason, that's when it gets like, no, because then you're telling your audience that it's okay as long as they are this. And so that's where I get like, oh, this is off-putting, I don't like this anymore, because like now clearly the author wants to say it's okay, rather than being like, well, we know this is wrong, we're just trying to give our reader a little fantasy of like what their life could have been if whatever. And I do think that to an extent, teenage girls, not young girls, because I feel like with Cardcaptors it's especially egregious, because Nakayoshi is meant for like 9 to 14 year olds. Like, I'm not going to say that teenage girls are stupid, but if you are making a series for a 9 to 14 year old, there needs to be some sort of like thinking about what you're putting down on the page. And I feel like, you know, 16 to 19 year old girls, I feel like they can distinguish that as student teacher romance is not something that they should strive for, but something they can just kind of like, oh, I'm going to read this series because like I do have a crush on my teacher, but I know it's not right. So I'll read this series and just kind of like get my fantasy through this. But like a 9 to 14 year old, they're not always going to understand. They're not always going to know that a character on the page being 23 is a lot older than they might actually think.
Yeah.
So I do think like young girls aren't stupid, but to put that onto them at an early age and make it seem like it's positive is definitely not something that we should be doing.
Not all student-teacher romances are forbidden love stories. Some have attempted to stuff their diamond-studded crust with some sort of filling. critiquing how inappropriate and predatory these relationships are. Blue is a shoujo slice-of-life manga written by Chiba Kozue. It centers on a young girl named Mimi on her adventures of returning to her hometown. In the first chapter, we learn that she was in a relationship with her teacher, Kazuya. He broke her heart when their relationship got exposed to the school and she was forced to move away. While the student-teacher relationship is a minor part of the series, its clever use of Mimi rediscovering her love for Hikari is beautiful. The legend of the blue cat ensures that one will find happiness and is the connection between both of her love interests, Hikari and Kake. Many people hate love triangles for many reasons, I know, but the love triangle here is used to give a background on the characters rather than just for the sake of drama. Mimi is sad and clueless about what love feels like. She even mentions this to Kake, asking what does it mean to love someone. She is scared of falling in love again because she doesn't want her heart broken. Although Mimi can be an annoyance at times, you feel for her as the story goes on and her journey throughout high school. When Mimi leaves Tokyo, she reunites with Hikari, her childhood friend that confessed his love for her. Likewise, Mimi also fell for Hikari when she was younger too, and the two rekindled their romance. Physical and emotional touch play key roles in their attraction to each other. The first volume sets the superficial tone of physical touch signifying love, but later on, emotional touch is sprinkled in more often as Hikari begins to be more understanding of Mimi's position. From false rumors of Hikari sleeping with Sumire and Kake's true feelings resurfacing, all show how Mimi's feelings for her teacher are slowly dissipating. Later on in the series, Kazuya sends a message to Mimi saying her mother is in the hospital and she needs to return home. However, this is a lie and he uses this to his advantage by claiming her as his own and locking her in his room. It's clear Kazuya was framed as a predator. Following the scene, we get a flashback showing Mimi and Kazuya's history. Mimi was struggling with her home life and Kazuya offered himself to her by listening to all her problems. Kazuya will also never let us forget that he can't let go of Mimi because she reminds him of his past self. While the flashback is a bit jarring, it quickly establishes the relationship between the two of them. Kazuya shows us his true colors when Mimi is resisting his romantic advances because of her love for Hikari, and then he attempts to SA her. Once Hikari finally finds the room where the two are staying, we never hear from Kazuya again. All of this takes place over the course of 3 volumes, but it's packed with so much nuance that we can thoroughly see and understand Mimi's experience. Intimate with its portrayals, but far enough not to get caught up in romanticization. This leads me to the final part of the video, the alleged overarching theme of student-teacher relationships, transcendence empowerment, fictional characters making suave moves. So, I hate to be a buzzkill, and I know a lot of you enjoy these series, but it's important to critically consume our media. We can enjoy our anime-manga and analyze it too. Student-teacher romances often aren't depicted, they are endorsed. And the hollow romance rhetoric inevitably falls flat because in most of these series, the target audience is teenagers. And in the wise words of Jordan Teresa,
all I want to say is that if you're a teenager, date someone your own age or date someone maybe 1 year older than you. Because if you do find an older man who likes you, it's because he's a predator. And what I care about the most in this situation above anything is girls and young women's safety.
Anime-manga writers justified these portrayals by saying it's empowering for a young hero or heroine to unapologetically go after an adult. But that is simply not true. A student dating their teacher is not empowering. It feeds the message to teenagers that as long as an adult is not overtly abusive, it is acceptable or even aspirational to be in a relationship with them. Anyways, that was the end of this video. I hope you found this interesting. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment on your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Until next time, bye!